The champagne glass slipped from my fingers the moment I saw those text messages on his phone. I wasn't snooping. I swear I wasn't. His phone was buzzing on the kitchen counter while he showered, and the screen lit up with a notification that made my blood freeze. "Can't wait to see you at the hotel tonight, my love. Delete this message like always. My love. Delete this message like always." That phrase hit me like a physical blow. My legs went weak, and I had to grip the marble countertop to steady myself. The expensive kitchen we'd renovated together suddenly felt foreign, cold. Every surface seemed to mock me with its perfection. I should mention, I'm the vice president of marketing at Sterling & Associates, one of the most prestigious consulting firms in the city. My husband David is the CEO. We built this company together from nothing, spent 15 years turning it into what it is today. I handled every major client relationship, every campaign that put us on the map, while he focused on operations and finance. Or so I thought. Standing there in my silk pajamas, staring at that message, I realized how naive I'd been. How many late nights had he claimed were investor meetings? How many weekend trips were supposedly client conferences? The pieces started falling into place with sickening clarity. I heard the shower turn off upstairs. My hands trembled as I quickly memorized the phone number, then placed his phone exactly where I'd found it. When he came down 20 minutes later, toweling his hair and humming some tune, I was making coffee like nothing had happened. "Morning, beautiful," he said, kissing my cheek. His lips felt like ice against my skin. "Morning," I managed, my voice somehow steady. "You're up early for a Saturday. Golf with Marcus, remember? Then I might stop by the office to prep for Monday's presentation." He grabbed his phone, glanced at it, then deleted something quickly. Too quickly. I nodded, stirring my coffee slowly. "Which presentation is that?" "The Henderson Industries pitch. You know, the one we've been working on for months?" His tone carried that subtle condescension I'd been hearing more often lately. Like I was forgetting important details. Like I wasn't pulling my weight. But here's what David didn't know. I'd been handling the Henderson Industries account personally. There was no Monday presentation. There never had been. After he left, I sat in our living room for 2 hours, just staring at the city skyline through our floor-to-ceiling windows. Our penthouse apartment, with its modern art and designer furniture, felt like a museum of lies. Every expensive piece seemed to whisper accusations at me. How long had this been going on? Who was she? Someone from work? A client? The questions circled my mind like vultures. I finally forced myself to move, to think clearly. This wasn't the time for tears or confrontation. This was the time for investigation. I'd built a career on gathering information, analyzing patterns, understanding people's motivations. I would approach this like any other project. Starting with that phone number. A simple reverse lookup told me everything I needed to know. The number belonged to Rebecca Chen, our senior accounts manager. 28 years old, MBA from Harvard, stunning in that effortless way that made other women feel invisible. She'd joined our company 18 months ago with glowing recommendations. 18 months. I thought back to when David started working later, taking more business trips, becoming more distant. The timeline matched perfectly. Rebecca. Beautiful, ambitious Rebecca, with her perfect smile and designer suits. Rebecca, who always volunteered for projects that required travel. Rebecca, who somehow always ended up in meetings with David, even when her expertise wasn't relevant. I remembered her at last year's company holiday party, how she'd laughed at all of David's jokes, how her hand had lingered on his arm when they talked. I'd felt a tiny prick of something then. Not quite jealousy, more like intuition. But I'd dismissed it. I trusted my husband. I trusted our marriage. What a fool I'd been. The morning stretched into afternoon as I pieced together more evidence. Credit card statements showed charges at restaurants I'd never been to, hotels in cities where David claimed to be alone on business. His social media, which I'd never scrutinized before, revealed subtle patterns. Photos from conferences where Rebecca also happened to be present, though never in the same frame. They were careful, professional. This wasn't some reckless affair born of passion. This was calculated, strategic. They were playing a long game, and I was the obstacle they were slowly maneuvering around. By evening, When David returned home smelling faintly of perfume that wasn't mine, I had made my decision. I sat across from him at dinner, watching him cut his steak with precise movements, listening to him talk about his golf game with Marcus, a friend I later discovered had been in Europe all week. "How's the Henderson presentation coming along?" I asked casually. He paused mid-chew. "Good, really good. I think we'll nail it." "That's wonderful. I should probably review the materials before Monday, don't you think? As VP of Marketing?" Another pause. "Of course. I'll send them over tomorrow." But we both knew he wouldn't. Just like we both knew there was no presentation. The lies had become so routine for him that he'd forgotten I created half the company's client relationships personally. That night, as David slept beside me, I stared at the ceiling and made a promise to myself. They thought they were so clever, so discreet. They thought I was just the devoted wife who looked the other way, who focused on work while David handled the real business decisions. They had no idea what they'd unleashed, because here's what neither of them knew. I hadn't just been VP of Marketing for the past 15 years. I'd been documenting everything. Every client interaction, every financial decision, every strategic move that built our company. I had records they'd forgotten existed. And in 3 weeks, at our annual company gala, I was going to show them exactly what happens when you underestimate the woman who built your success. The next few days were torture disguised as normalcy. David continued his charade with Oscar-worthy performance. He'd kiss me goodbye each morning, tell me he loved me, even brought home flowers on Tuesday. White roses, my supposed favorites. Except my favorites had always been peonies. Rebecca apparently preferred roses. I know this because I'd started watching. Not in a creepy, stalker way. I'm a businesswoman, not a detective. But patterns reveal themselves when you know what to look for. And David had always been careless with details. Wednesday morning, I arrived at the office early and took the elevator to the executive floor. Our building has glass offices. David's idea, something about transparency and leadership. The irony wasn't lost on me as I watched him through his glass walls, leaning over Rebecca's desk, his hand resting on her lower back. They weren't even trying to hide it anymore. Or maybe they'd never hidden it, and I'd just been too trusting to see. "Morning, Mrs. Sterling," Rebecca said when she noticed me watching. Her smile was perfect. Warm, professional, completely innocent. David was just reviewing my quarterly reports. "Of course he was," I replied smoothly. "Those reports are so important. I should take a look at them myself." The flash of panic in her eyes lasted maybe half a second, but I caught it. David's hand dropped from her back like he'd been burned. "Actually, they're still in draft form," he said quickly. "Probably better to wait until they're finalized. Since when do we keep drafts from each other?" I kept my voice light, curious rather than accusatory. "We've always shared everything in this company. Transparency, remember?" David's jaw tightened. "Of course. I just meant, I understand exactly what you meant." The words came out sharper than I intended, and an uncomfortable silence filled the space between us. Rebecca busied herself with papers on her desk, suddenly very interested in a file folder. David cleared his throat and suggested we discuss it in his office later. I smiled and agreed, then walked to my own office and closed the door. The problem with glass walls is that they work both ways. While I could see them, they could see me too, and I needed privacy for what I was about to do. I pulled out my personal laptop and started digging deeper. Corporate credit cards, travel expenses, client entertainment budgets, everything I'd previously trusted David to handle without oversight. What I found made my stomach turn. Expensive dinners for two at restaurants I'd never heard of. Hotel suites in cities where our company had no clients. Jewelry purchases that never made it home to me. The spending pattern told a story of systematic deception, funded by our joint business success. But the financial betrayal paled compared to what I discovered next. Hidden in David's travel expense reports were meetings with potential buyers. Not clients, buyers. People interested in acquiring Sterling and Associates. David had been shopping our company for months, negotiating behind my back, preparing to sell the business I'd helped build from nothing. The emails I found in his rarely used company account were devastating. Discussions about removing redundant executive positions after acquisition, Conversations about streamlining management structure. Corporate speak for get rid of the wife, keep the mistress. They weren't just having an affair. They were planning to erase me entirely. I printed everything, my hands shaking with rage. 15 years of marriage. 15 years of building something together. And he was ready to throw it all away for a woman young enough to be his daughter, while simultaneously destroying my career and financial security. That evening, David came home late again. Another client dinner that I now knew was a romantic evening with Rebecca. "How was your day?" he asked, loosening his tie. Such a casual question from someone actively plotting my destruction. "Productive," I answered. "I've been thinking about the company's future. Our future." Something in my tone made him pause. For a moment, his mask slipped, and I saw wariness in his eyes. "What do you mean?" "Just that we've built something amazing together. It would be tragic if someone tried to tear it down." He studied my face for a long moment. "Of course. We're partners in everything." Partners. The word tasted bitter in my mouth. "David," I said carefully, "if someone were betraying the company, betraying our trust, what would you want me to do about it?" "Report it immediately, naturally. Betrayal is the worst kind of business offense." His voice was steady, but a muscle in his jaw twitched. "Even if the betrayal came from someone close to us?" "Especially then." The audacity was breathtaking. Here he stood, actively betraying me in every possible way, lecturing me about the importance of loyalty and trust. "I'm glad we're on the same page," I said softly. Over the following days, I watched their relationship with new eyes, the secret glances across conference rooms, Rebecca's habit of staying late on the same nights David worked overtime, the way she touched his arm during presentations, just a beat too long to be professional. Our employees had started noticing too. I caught whispered conversations that stopped when I entered rooms, sympathetic looks from colleagues who thought I was oblivious to what everyone else could see. The humiliation was almost worse than the betrayal. I'd become that woman, the clueless wife, the last to know, the object of workplace pity. But they underestimated me. They saw what they expected to see, a devoted spouse in denial, too comfortable to rock the boat. They had no idea I was documenting every meeting, every expense report, every legal document that would matter when this all came crashing down. Because it would come crashing down, I was going to make sure of it. The annual company gala was in 10 days. Our biggest event of the year, celebrating our success and recognizing our top performers. David traditionally gave a speech about our company values, integrity, loyalty, partnership. The irony was going to be exquisite. But first, I needed to ensure Rebecca would be there to witness her downfall alongside David's. And I knew exactly how to guarantee that. The beauty of knowing your enemy's schedule is that you can always stay 3 steps ahead. I knew David and Rebecca met every Tuesday at the Meridian Hotel downtown. Not for business, for whatever they called their pathetic little arrangement. I also knew they always used the service elevator to avoid being seen together in the main lobby. That Tuesday, I positioned myself in the hotel's elegant bar, strategically seated where I could see both the elevator banks and the restaurant entrance. I wasn't there to confront them. I was there to learn. At exactly 6:47 p.m., Rebecca emerged from the service elevator, her hair slightly mussed, her blouse wrinkled in a way that told me everything I needed to know. David followed 30 seconds later, adjusting his tie with the satisfied expression of a man who thought he was getting away with murder. They didn't see me. They never looked for me, because I was just the boring wife who stayed home with her books and her wine. How wrong they were. I followed them to the restaurant, taking a table 2 sections away with perfect sightlines. What I witnessed over the next 2 hours was fascinating and nauseating in equal measure. They weren't just lovers. They were conspirators. Rebecca pulled out a folder. Company documents I recognized immediately. Client lists, financial projections, strategic plans. Information she had no business accessing, let alone sharing outside the office. "The Blackstone Group increased their offer by 12%, she whispered, sliding papers across the table. "They're willing to fast-track due diligence if we can provide additional client retention data." David nodded, studying the documents. "What about the transition timeline?" 6 months maximum. They want a clean slate for management structure. Rebecca's smile was predatory. No complications, no redundancies. No redundancies, meaning no me. I sipped my wine and continued listening as they planned the systematic dismantling of everything I'd built. They discussed which employees to keep, which clients would be most valuable to the new owners, how to structure the sale to minimize tax implications. They were selling my life's work like it was nothing more than office furniture. But here's what they didn't know. I'd been preparing for this possibility longer than they'd been planning their betrayal. You see, when David and I first incorporated Sterling and Associates, I insisted on specific legal protections. Call it intuition, call it business sense, but I'd seen too many women pushed out of companies they'd helped build. I made sure the corporate structure included safeguards they'd apparently forgotten about, like the clause requiring unanimous executive approval for any sale or major restructuring, like the provision giving either founding partner veto power over personnel decisions, like the stipulation that any attempt to remove a founding executive without cause would trigger an immediate audit of company finances and decision-making processes. David had signed those documents 15 years ago without really reading them. He'd been too focused on the excitement of starting our own business, too trusting of his loving wife's paranoid legal precautions. Now those precautions were going to save me. That night, I sat in my study and outlined my strategy. This wasn't just about stopping their betrayal. It was about ensuring they faced consequences that matched the scope of their deception. First, I contacted Marcus, David's supposed golf partner. Turns out Marcus had been in London for 3 weeks, completely unaware David had been using his name as an alibi. Marcus was furious. He'd been David's friend for 20 years, and being used as unwitting cover for an affair didn't sit well with him. "What do you need from me?" Marcus asked after I explained the situation. "Just honesty," I replied. "When the time comes, I need you to tell people exactly where you've been these past few weeks." Marcus agreed immediately. "David's always been arrogant, but this is disgusting. You deserve better." Next, I reached out to our company's IT department, specifically to Tom, our head of cybersecurity. Tom had always been more loyal to me than to David. I'd been the one who recommended his promotion, who fought for his salary increases. "I need to understand our email retention policies," I told him during a casual coffee meeting. "Everything's backed up for 7 years minimum," Tom explained. "Company policy requires it for legal compliance. Why? Just reviewing our data protection procedures. You know how thorough I like to be." Tom smiled. "One of your best qualities. Don't worry. If anyone ever needed to recover old emails or documents, we've got comprehensive archives." Perfect. The third piece of my plan involved Rebecca herself. She'd been nominated for the Rising Star Award at our upcoming gala, an honor that required her to give a presentation about her contributions to the company's success. I made sure her nomination went through. In fact, I personally advocated for it during the selection committee meeting. "Rebecca has shown remarkable initiative this year," I told the committee. "She deserves recognition for her unique contributions to our executive team's effectiveness." David looked surprised but pleased. Rebecca blushed prettily and thanked me for my support. Neither of them questioned why I was being so generous to someone I supposedly didn't suspect. The final element was the most crucial, and the most satisfying to arrange. Our annual gala always featured a multimedia presentation highlighting the company's achievements, client testimonials, and employee spotlights. As VP of Marketing, I traditionally oversaw the audio-visual setup. This year, I took personal control of every technical detail. "I want everything perfect," I told the AV team. "This presentation represents our company's values and integrity. No mistakes, no shortcuts." The team nodded enthusiastically. They knew my reputation for excellence and attention to detail. What they didn't know was that I'd been preparing additional presentation materials that would showcase David and Rebecca's unique contributions to the company in ways they never expected. The screenshots of their text messages, the receipts from their romantic dinners, the financial records showing misappropriated company funds, the email chains discussing the secret sale negotiations. Everything would be displayed in high definition across multiple screens, visible to our 200 most important clients, employees, and business partners. The beauty of my plan was its simplicity. I wasn't breaking any laws. I wasn't engaging in corporate sabotage. I was simply sharing factual information about how our executive team had been conducting business. If David and Rebecca were proud of their relationship and their strategic planning, they should be thrilled to have it acknowledged publicly. 3 days before the gala, Rebecca stopped by my office with a nervous smile. "I'm so excited about Saturday night," she said. "It feels like a real celebration of everything we've accomplished this year." "Oh, it absolutely will be," I assured her. "I have a feeling this gala will be remembered for years to come." She left looking pleased and confident. Poor Rebecca. She had no idea how right I was. The night of the gala, I dressed with particular care. I chose a deep burgundy silk dress. Elegant, powerful, the kind of outfit that commands attention. My grandmother's diamond earrings caught the light perfectly, and I'd had my hair styled in a classic updo that photographed beautifully. If I was going to destroy my husband's life, I wanted to look stunning while doing it. David stood beside me in the foyer of the grand ballroom, greeting guests like the consummate host he'd always been. His smile was genuine, his handshake firm. He truly believed he was untouchable. "You look beautiful tonight," he whispered in my ear as the mayor and his wife approached us. "Thank you, darling. I feel like tonight's going to be very special." Rebecca arrived 20 minutes later in a champagne-colored gown that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. She made her rounds expertly, charming clients and colleagues with the same practiced smile she'd been using to lie to my face for months. "Doesn't Rebecca look lovely?" David commented, watching her work the room. "Absolutely radiant," I agreed. "She's really glowing these days. Success suits her." The first hour proceeded exactly as planned. Cocktails, networking, the usual corporate socializing that had become second nature to me over the years. I played my part perfectly. The gracious hostess, the supportive wife, the respected executive. Several clients complimented me on the evening's organization. "This is your best gala yet," Margaret Thornton from Apex Industries told me. "I'm looking forward to the presentation. I heard you've prepared something really special this year." "You have no idea," I replied with a smile that probably looked more predatory than I intended. At 8:30, dinner was served. David gave his traditional welcome speech, talking about integrity, partnership, and the values that made Sterling and Associates special. The irony was so thick you could cut it with a knife. "We've always believed that trust is the foundation of any successful relationship," he said, his voice carrying across the ballroom. "Whether with our clients, our partners, or our colleagues, honesty and loyalty are what set us apart." The applause was thunderous. I clapped along with everyone else, even stood for the ovation. David caught my eye and winked, clearly pleased with his performance. Rebecca's acceptance speech for her Rising Star Award was equally entertaining. She talked about learning from experienced mentors, about the importance of dedication and discretion in client relationships, about her commitment to the company's continued success. "I've been incredibly fortunate to work closely with our executive team," she said, her gaze lingering on David. "Their guidance has been intimate and transformative." More applause. More pleased smiles between her and David. More obvious signals that half the room had probably already picked up on. At 9:15, I excused myself to check on the presentation setup. The AV team was ready, the screens were positioned perfectly, and my special materials were loaded and tested. "Everything looks perfect," I told Tom, our IT director. "When I give the signal, start the presentation exactly as we rehearsed." "You got it. This is going to be one hell of a show." He had no idea. I returned to the ballroom just as dessert was being served. David stood to introduce the evening's multimedia presentation, our annual celebration of achievements and company highlights. "Ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to present a look back at this year's remarkable successes and the people who made them possible." The lights dimmed, the screens illuminated with our company logo. Soft music began playing as images of our offices, our team, our achievements filled the displays. For the first 10 minutes, everything proceeded normally. client testimonials, project highlights, employee recognition photos. The audience watched with polite interest, wine glasses glinting in the reflected screen light. Then came the section I'd titled, Executive Leadership in Action. The first image showed David and Rebecca in the hotel elevator, his hand on her waist, her head tilted toward his shoulder. The timestamp clearly showed it was during business hours on a Tuesday afternoon. A murmur rippled through the audience. David's fork clattered against his plate. The next slide showed text message screenshots. Can't wait to feel your hands on me again. The hotel room is booked for tonight. Delete this like always. The murmur became gasps. Someone at the back of the room let out a nervous laugh. Rebecca had gone completely white. She was staring at the screens like she was watching her own execution. But I wasn't finished. The presentation continued with financial records, hotel charges to company credit cards, expensive dinners for two billed as client entertainment, except the restaurant's security cameras showed only David and Rebecca, feeding each other dessert like teenagers. Then came the business betrayal evidence, email chains about selling the company, discussions about eliminating redundant executives, Rebecca's unauthorized access to confidential client information. The ballroom was completely silent now, except for the quiet hum of the projectors. 200 of the most influential people in our industry were watching my husband and his mistress get exposed in real time. David finally found his voice. "Turn it off," he hissed at me. "Turn it off right now." "But darling," I said sweetly, loud enough for nearby tables to hear, "you always said transparency was our greatest strength." The final section of the presentation was my favorite. Security footage from the office showing Rebecca entering David's suite after hours. Audio recordings of their phone conversations about the sale timeline. Bank records showing David had already moved significant funds to accounts I didn't have access to. When the screens finally went dark, the silence was deafening. Then Margaret Thornton started clapping, slowly at first, then with increasing enthusiasm. "Brilliant presentation," she said, her voice carrying across the stunned room. "Absolutely brilliant." Other clients joined in, not celebrating David and Rebecca's betrayal, but applauding what they recognized as a masterful business strategy. I'd just demonstrated exactly how thorough, how strategic, how utterly uncompromising I could be when protecting what was mine. David pushed back from the table so violently his chair toppled over. Rebecca was crying, her mascara running in dark streams down her face. "You'll pay for this," David snarled at me as he grabbed his jacket. "Actually," I said, standing gracefully and adjusting my grandmother's earrings, "I think you'll find that you're the one who's going to pay. For everything." Because here's what David had forgotten in his arrogance. I still owned 51% of Sterling and Associates. And as of tonight, I was the sole executive authority. 6 months later, I sat in my newly redesigned corner office, reviewing the quarterly reports that showed Sterling and Associates had not only survived the scandal, but thrived because of it. It turns out that publicly demonstrating your commitment to integrity, even when it requires destroying your own husband, is excellent for business. The morning after the gala, my phone hadn't stopped ringing. Clients who'd witnessed David's humiliation were calling to express their admiration for my handling of the situation. "That took real courage," Margaret Thornton told me. "And frankly, it's exactly the kind of leadership we want to work with." New business flooded in. Companies that had previously hesitated to work with us suddenly saw Sterling and Associates as the gold standard for corporate accountability. My personal reputation as someone who would sacrifice everything for principle became our greatest marketing asset. David and Rebecca didn't fare as well. The Blackstone Group withdrew their acquisition offer within 48 hours. Given the recent revelations about management integrity, their representative explained in a very formal letter, we no longer consider Sterling and Associates a suitable acquisition target under current leadership. Of course not. They'd been negotiating with David specifically, trusting his promises about a smooth transition and clean corporate structure. Learning that he'd been embezzling company funds and conducting unauthorized sale negotiations made them question everything about the potential deal. David tried to fight the divorce, naturally. He hired expensive lawyers and claimed I'd damaged his reputation unfairly. But it's hard to argue defamation when the evidence is documented in company records, security footage, and his own text messages. His legal team eventually advised him to settle quietly. The prenuptial agreement we'd signed 15 years ago, another one of my paranoid precautions, ensured that his adultery voided any claim to my business assets. He kept the house. I kept the company. Rebecca's career ended even more swiftly than David's. Word travels fast in our industry, and the woman who slept with her boss while stealing client information isn't exactly a sought-after professional reference. Her LinkedIn profile now lists her as seeking new opportunities in retail management. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But mostly, I felt liberated. The company was mine now, completely and unambiguously. I'd promoted Tom to Chief Information Officer and given substantial raises to the employees who'd remained loyal during the transition. We were smaller than before, but stronger. More importantly, I was stronger. The woman who'd stood in her kitchen 6 months ago, hands shaking as she read her husband's betrayal, felt like a stranger to me now. That woman had been willing to accept lies, to ignore her intuition, to prioritize peace over truth. This woman, the one sitting in her corner office with a view of the entire city, would never make that mistake again. My phone buzzed with a text message. For a split second, my heart rate spiked. Old trauma dies hard. But it was just Marcus, David's former friend who'd become one of my strongest allies. Saw the Forbes article about the company's growth. Congratulations. Drinks tonight to celebrate? I smiled and texted back, absolutely. I'll bring the champagne. The Forbes article had been the cherry on top of an already sweet victory. From betrayal to triumph. How one executive turned personal devastation into professional excellence. The journalist had focused on my strategic thinking, my crisis management skills, the way I'd transformed a potentially company-destroying scandal into a showcase of leadership strength. I'd become something of a legend in business circles, the woman who'd destroyed her cheating husband at their own company gala. The executive who'd chosen principle over comfort, truth over denial. Speaking requests poured in from leadership conferences, business schools, women's professional organizations. Everyone wanted to know how I'd done it, how I'd found the courage to blow up my own life so spectacularly. The answer was simpler than they expected. I'd finally realized that my life was worth fighting for. That evening, as I walked through the office after everyone else had gone home, I stopped at the conference room where we'd held so many meetings with David and Rebecca. The room where they'd probably laughed about how clueless I was, how easy it would be to push me aside when the time came. The space looked different now, brighter somehow. The glass walls that had once felt like barriers now seemed like symbols of the transparency I'd insisted on. I thought about that night at the gala, the moment when I'd stood up and delivered the coup de grace that ended their deception forever. The applause that followed hadn't been for the destruction of my marriage. It had been recognition of someone finally taking control of her own story. These days, people ask me if I regret what I did, if I wish I'd handled things quietly, privately, without the public spectacle. My answer is always the same. The only thing I regret is not seeing it sooner, because the truth, when it finally comes to light, is always worth the cost of revealing it, even if that truth destroys everything you thought you knew about your life, especially then.